am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that are read for the last 40 years. And today, I have my special guest. He is award-winning author, and of course, best-selling author too, no other than Mr. David Levine. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. David.
Hello.
And can you please introduce yourself?
My name's David D. Levine. I always use the middle initial because David Levine is a pretty common name. And I am a writer of science fiction and fantasy. My most recent novel is called The Kuiper Belt Job, but this is my fourth published novel. The first three were the Arabella of Mars trilogy, which came out in 2016, 2017, 2018. The first book of that series won a Nebula Award. And I'm also the author of over 60 science fiction and fantasy short stories, one of which won a Hugo in 2006.
Congratulations, Mr. David. How does it feel that you won all prestigious award-winning bodies in the book industry?
Yeah. I remember when I won the Hugo. It's my first major award, and that is the first time I can recall myself ever literally sobbing with happiness. That was an extraordinary event.
What inspired you to become an author?
I have basically always been a science fiction writer. I have actually right next to me as I speak, I have a box of my papers from when I was a kid, and I know that I was writing science fiction stories even when I was a small child. I always wanted to, and in college, I took a science fiction writing course, and people told me these things are good. You should try to get these professionally published. Right after graduation, I started working as a technical writer. I was writing software documentation for Tektronix and then for Intel. And writing science fiction was just too much like the day job. My fiction writing brain was just deactivated. So for 20 years, I wrote technical documentation, and that was my day job, and it was lucrative, and I enjoyed my job. After 20 years as a technical writer, I saw that my job was basically telling the readers how to get around the terrible user interface problems that the programmers had put into the software. And I got tired of having to, as we technical writers say, turn a jungle into a garden by drawing a map. I wanted an opportunity to actually fix these problems instead of telling people how to work around them. So I changed careers. I knew that I knew from working in the industry for 20 years that I knew that I had the skills. So I changed from technical writing to software engineering. I was still sitting at a keyboard every day, but I was typing code instead of English. And suddenly I began to be able to write fiction again. So I started writing fiction again in 1998. I went to the Clarion West Writers Workshop in 2000, and I began selling almost immediately after that. I was actually nominated for the what was then called the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer. There's a 2-year eligibility window for that, and I was eligible in both the years that I was nominated in both the years that I was eligible, which was a great honor. But I didn't win. But I did get nominated for a Hugo in the second year that I was nominated for the John W. Campbell. So I came out of the gate really strong, and I have been continuing to publish I graduated from Clarion in 2000. I made my first sale in 2000. It came out in 2001, and here it is, 2024. So I've been in this biz for coming up on 25 years now, and that's astonishing to me. I still think of myself as a new writer, but here I am.
Well, being nominated means to say you're already one of the best. So, Mr. David, can you tell us about your writing process?
I am. So we use the term plotters or pantsers. Plotters or planners are people who plan everything out beforehand, and pantsers, which is to say those who fly by the seat of their pants, are people who begin writing not knowing what not knowing what the end is in sight. I've also heard the terms architects and gardeners. Architects plan the building beforehand. Gardeners just go out there and start digging in the dirt with their fingers. And I am definitely on the planner or architect side of that spectrum. I used to outline my stories point by point, like paragraph by paragraph. And as I have become more experienced, as I've learned more about how to create story, I've becoming more and more of a pantser. I still outline, but my outline points are further apart than they used to be. So I now have a broad sketch of what the story is going to look like rather than a detailed point by point outline. My process for novels is that I start off, it involves a lot of what I call noodling, which is I will sit down and begin talking out loud on paper. I type out my ideas for the book. I write it out. I write it out in text. I'm a fast typist, so it's easy for me to just sit down and write. So this is what I want it to be about. And suppose that the main character is thus and such. Well, what does that imply about where this book might be set? And so there's a lot of what if and suppose I could and well, let's try in this text. And it's kind of my diary. My notes file for every novel is usually 2 or 3 times the size of the novel itself, because it's basically every word of thoughts, ideas. I do a lot of copying and pasting research information from the web into my notes file in case I need to refer to it later. So these files are really big. And it's chronological. Every time I sit down for a writing session, I'll begin by putting the date and location, and then I start typing about, here's what I'm going to write about today. And sometimes I spend the whole writing day just working on the notes when I'm thinking about who the characters are, or kind of thinking about what the plot is and where the story might go, or doing research. Sometimes all of my work is in the notes file, or sometimes my notes file just is, wrote 500 words today. And I'll usually say a little bit something about what I wrote. So I bop back and forth between the notes file and the draft. And the notes file, usually for a novel-sized work, I'll spend anything from a couple of months to a year and a half doing research and outlining and character design, and what I call noodling. And then I begin drafting. And I bop back and forth between the draft and the notes file for a novel-sized work, typically a year or more. I'm a fast typist, but I'm not a very fast writer. And usually what I'll do for a novel is I'll write an outline, kind of a 1 point per scene-ish, or for broad plot beat might involve a couple of scenes. And usually what I find is when I get halfway through, I discover that I outlined everything in the first half of the book in some detail. And then I reach the point where like the entire second half of the book is just 2 outline points. So I stop at that midway point and I re-outline the back half of the book based on what I've learned about the situation and the characters by writing the first half. And generally I will do that same thing at about the 3/4 point as well. I can't start writing until I have an end in mind, although more and more the end that I reach is not necessarily the end that I originally had in mind. So in that way, I've become more of a pantser. But I definitely cannot set out on the journey until I have a destination in mind. I have tried and tried and tried and tried to just close my eyes and start typing. And I'm a touch typist, so I can do that. But I've tried and tried and tried to just begin, and I just can't. Even if I try to pants it, my brain is working in the background, coming up with the next bit and the bit after that and the ending. So that's just the way I am. I can't do anything in life without having a goal in mind. And it's sometimes kind of frustrating me. I wish I could just be footloose and fancy free sometimes, but that seems to be the way I'm built.
Very well said, Mr. David. So, how do you develop your characters and plot lines?
I am a plot-focused writer. I have a lecture that I give. I do a lot of teaching about writing, and I have a workshop that I give called Integrating Plot Character and World Building. And in this lecture, I use the analogy of a plant. That a plant has roots and a stalk and leaves. And the leaves are the characters. That's the part that waves around, is in your face. They're pretty, there may be flowers as well. The leaves are the part that are most attractive, most interesting. And so those are the characters. The stem is the plot. This is the thing that this is the thing that connects all the characters together and gives them a reason for being. Because if you had leaves with no plant, then they'd be out there gathering sunlight, but they'd all just be lying around on the floor, on the ground. They would never, they would be gathering the sunlight and developing the energy, but they would not have any way to share it with each other, and no way of no water and nutrients would be getting to them from the ground, so they would just lie there in the sun and die. But if you have a stem and branches, which is the plot that connects the characters together, then that gives the characters something to do. It gives them a reason to be. The characters take in the sunlight and feed their energy into the stem, and the stem brings up nutrients and water to feed the leaves. Oh, wait, but where does the stem bring the nutrients and water from? That's why you have to have roots. And the roots are the world. The roots are the place that the story takes place, and the world is an essential part of any fantastic story. Now, the world is also an important part of mundane stories, of literature stories, but you don't have to do as much work on that because you can just take from the real world. You may not even have to describe it because you can understand that the reader already knows it. But in a fantastic story, whether it's science fiction or fantasy, it's the author's job to come up with a world and then connect the world and the characters and the plot. And so now you've got the roots, you've got the stem, and then you've got the leaves. Which one comes first? Really, you need all three of them. And in this workshop, I talk about how as you are developing your story, you can start with anything. I think most writers begin with characters. I usually begin with setting. And so the question that you have to ask yourself is, my main character is a banker. Okay, well, if you start with that, then that implies things about the world. Like if my main character is a banker, that implies that these are not, these are not people who are living on the plains and hunting buffalo to get by. It implies a world that has money, that has commerce, that has banks. So this implies things about the world. And then you can ask further questions. Is this a science fictional kind of a world? Is this a historical world? What kind of bank is my character a banker in? And then we say, so my main character is a banker and is existing in, let's say, 1880 San Francisco. So what are the things that could happen? Well, maybe there's fraud. Maybe there's a bank robbery. Maybe the main character is themselves the one who is committing the fraud or the robbery. Or maybe they are the person who is having to defend the bank against these things. So the character and the setting then begin to imply a plot. Well, suppose I'm writing a fantastical story, a historical fantasy set in 1880 San Francisco. My main character is a banker. Well, okay, if it's going to be a fantasy, then there has to be some kind of magical element. So suppose this is a world where, let's say the currency is not gold, but mana, magical energy. Okay, so what are the things that this implies about the book? Well, if the main character is a banker and the bank is full of magical energy, then if there's going to be a bank robbery, then it's going to be some kind of theft of mana. They may not actually have to physically break into the vault in order to steal the stuff. So as the story is going on, I begin to outline, I'm beginning to develop. And by the way, I'm making up this story as we talk. This is not a story that I've ever actually written or considered before. Suppose the bank robbers, let's say that the mana is a physical thing, okay, and it's in the vault, and the bank robbers are breaking in. So that implies things about the plot. So I've just made a decision. I've made a decision that mana is a physical thing, and that influences the plot. Now, suppose I need to make it difficult for the for the robbers to get away. I mean, if mana is a physical thing, but it doesn't have any real mass, then the bank robbers could get in and stuff everything in their pockets and just walk out. So I'm gonna make a change. I'm gonna make a change that mana is a thing with heft, like gold. So now I have to go back and make changes in the plot that I've developed so far that might have depended on the idea that mana doesn't weigh anything. So the world building change I just came up with may involve going back and making some changes in the plot. Now, if I decide that for purposes of plot I'd like something to happen, then that may mean I need to make a world building change. In this case, I wanted the plot to involve that being difficult to get the mana out of the vault. So that was a world building change that turned mana into a very heavy physical thing. And that might have some impact on my main character. For example, I was thinking my main character is a person who is rather slight. Well, suppose that in this world where mana is a very heavy thing, bankers have to be big, burly individuals. Well, that has an implication about what kind of person they is, how they interact with the world, what their personality is. So the plot, the character, and the world, they all co-develop. They all develop together during the writing process. You may make a change in one that will affect the other two. And eventually you come to the point that the system is stable. And then that, for me as a planner, that's where I begin drafting. If a person is a pantser, you can totally make these changes as you are drafting, but that does mean that you're going to have to go back and make sure that the whole manuscript is internally consistent, incorporating all the changes that you may have made.
Thank you, Mr. David, for your thoughts. So, what challenges have you faced in your writing career?
Well, the first challenge is getting published, of course. And I like to say that writers are never, ever satisfied, because you start off by going, okay, if only I could get a personal rejection, then I would be happy. And you start getting personal rejections, and it's like, oh man, these personal rejections are great, but I wish I could get an acceptance. If I could get an acceptance, then I'd be happy. And then you start getting accepted, and oh, well, these acceptances are great, but I sure wish I could get accepted at a major publication. Then I'd be happy. And so it goes. You're always moving your own goalposts. And so my challenges have changed as my career has gone on. At first, my challenge was just to get a story published, and then then to get published in more important publications, then looking at hoping to get an award nomination, maybe an award win. Then I started moving into the novel realm. So I'm always moving my own goalposts and making, and I can't help this. It's not necessarily mentally healthy, but I do. I'm always disappointed in myself, because no matter what I can look back and see that I've achieved, I can look forward and see that there's this new thing that I want that I haven't yet achieved. And so that is ambition, and that drives people forward. But it can be kind of miserable to be driven by ambition and not to be able to be happy with the achievements that you have achieved. Right now, my biggest challenge is that this new book, The Kuiper Belt Job, came from a small press and hasn't gotten as much attention as my previous books, which came out from a large publisher. So they did not. So The Kuiper Belt Job has not gotten reviewed by any of the major book review publications, Kirkus, Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, or Locus, the major magazine of the science fiction field. And it hasn't been mentioned by anybody as, oh, hey, this is a book to look for. This is a book you should consider at award time. And in my experience with short stories, now I've published over 60 short stories. So I've seen short stories really take off, and I've seen short stories vanish completely. So you can really tell whether something is picking up buzz or whether it's just lying there on the page. And I feel that this book, I love it dearly. I really had thought while I was writing it that this could be a big breakout. It hasn't achieved the kind of broad success I would have liked. So I'm continuing to push, but I'm starting to think about the next book. Think about what am I going to do after this? Because I spend a year, 2 years writing a book, and then nearly a year on and off of well, first you need to find a publisher. If you're traditionally published, as I am, first you need to find a publisher, and then there's the whole process of editing it, revising it according to the publisher's feedback, and then there's publicity, and the publicity process starts before the book comes out, and then continues after it comes out. So that's what I'm focusing on right now. I'm kind of in the end game of publicity for this book, and so I'm starting to think about what is the next book. But I don't have the kind of brain that can really work effectively on more than one thing at once. So while I've been revising and publicizing this book, I have not really been working too hard on the next book. I know other authors who are much better at they will publicize in the morning and draft in the afternoon. But I don't seem to be cut out that way.
Well, Mr. David, before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening according to my ranking tops in the last 30 days because in Cameroon, I got number 5 on the Apple charts, Jamaica at number 6, Cambodia at number 31, Zambia at number 32, Taiwan at 43, Japan at 49, Malawi at number 29, Uganda at 24, Ghana at 86, and a lot more. This is provided by Paddy Status. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world like Mr. David Levine. So, Mr. David, let's talk about your favorite book.
My favorite book of my own.
Yes.
Well, that's like asking a parent which is their favorite child. Um, actually, the books, the Arabella of Mars is the book that I'm proudest of because it's had the most sales and gotten the most positive reviews and the most awards. The Kuiper Belt Job is my newest book, and I'm very proud of it, and I love it. And then there are the 4 books that I wrote before Arabella sold, and I love all of them in different ways too. My first book, I was very confident in it. I was sure it would sell, and it did not. And I felt that way about the second word and the third one, and Arabella was the 4th. So, it really is like, which of your children do you love the best? I love them all in different ways.
Well said. So the Kuiper Belt Job, how did you craft it?
Well, this one started off. It started off. I can tell you exactly where and when I got the idea. It was at the World Science Fiction Convention in Chicago, in I believe 2007 or 2008. I could look it up. And there was a panel at that convention where it was let's brainstorm a sequel to the Firefly movie. So this was about 7-10 years after the Firefly movie Serenity came out, and so we thought if we were going to revive the series with a new movie, what would we do? And so it was a group thing. We were all throwing ideas into the pot. So I can't really tell you where this idea came from, but the idea that we came up with as a group was that the Firefly movie should open with Mal's son. Of course, Mal had a son. Mal's son shows up to say, "Dad's in jail. I'm putting the gang back together to break him out of jail." So that idea just stuck in my head for 10 years, 15 years. That idea just stuck in my head, and I decided that I would write it as my own novel. I was not going to write Firefly fanfic, but what I was going to do was try to capture the things that made Firefly so fun. So one thing that I really focused on was the ensemble. I have never written a story with an ensemble cast before, so that was a challenge for me. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what makes an ensemble work. And an ensemble works because you have a diversity of characters. You have characters who are very different from each other, who have to work together in order to achieve their goals. And it's all connected with the concept of found family. And so there is something in TV tropes, which, I love TV tropes, but heavens, don't go into TV tropes unless you have hours to spare. It's called the 5-man band in TV tropes. And this is something that's in anime and it's in comics. There's an awful lot of fictional groups of 5, which are described as the leader, the Lancer, the big guy, the smart or weird guy, and used to be called the chick. Now it's called the heart. So the leader, the Lancer, the muscle, the brain, and the heart. So you'll see an awful lot of fictional groups that break down in this way. And definitely it applies to Firefly. It also applies to a TV show that I'm very fond of called Leverage. It's weird. I thought that Leverage is more popular than it is, but when I mention Leverage, usually maybe a quarter or a third of the people in the room have even heard of it. But this book is, the characters are kind of a mashup of the characters from Firefly and Leverage. And to me, there's a very clear mapping of the Firefly characters to the Leverage characters. So each of my characters is kind of a mashup of the Firefly character and the corresponding character from Leverage, but also they're my own, because having started off as a sketch of a character, which is based on these two media sources, I have turned that sketch into a fully fledged character, because you can't write a 100,000-word novel without putting a lot of effort into who these people are and thinking about and making them do things, and then what they do tells you, to some extent the characters are puppets under my control, and to some extent I'm influenced by the things that they've already done. We have wiring in our brains that helps us to understand and predict the actions of other people. This is a survival thing for human beings. And so the interacting with a fictional character by reading about them activates that wiring in your brain such that you begin to understand who this person is in an attempt to, for survival's sake, predict what they're likely to do in the future. This is why some people we trust and some people we do not trust. And so you get these reactions to fictional characters, and so you begin to build up a picture of them as a person, as a human being, with certain motivations and priorities. And the fictional characters that tickle those brain wires most effectively are the ones that are consistent but not too consistent. They're consistent in a way that is inconsistent in the way that real people are inconsistent. So you can bounce off of a character. You can say this character doesn't behave like a real human being because they're too consistent, they're too flat or too shallow, or because they're too inconsistent. He did this on page 15, but now 30 pages later, suddenly he's turned into a big hero. So you build up these characters as though they were human beings in your mind. And this is true even of characters that I am creating, that having written about the character and having put the character through situations and made them do things, even though that thing was a thing that I made them do, it creates a history for the character. I mean, this is a character that I made do one thing 50 pages ago. Now I'm having to make them do something else. But if it's not consistent with that previous thing, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't tickle my brain wires in the right way. So I'm using that capability that all human beings have. Instead of just evaluating a person, I'm actually creating a person. And so I am creating a person who feels like a real human being. And in some cases, this is a person you would want to hang out with. And in some cases, it's definitely a person you would not want to hang out with. But whether they're somebody you like or not, in order to be an effective character, they have to be somebody that you understand at a gut level.
Interesting, Mr. David. So the Cannibal Club Chronicles, is this a series, a quartet, or a trilogy?
The book was written as a standalone with series potential. There are plenty of more stories that could be told about the Cannibal Club. I have published two, I believe they're both novelettes, long short stories, in the same universe, prequels to the Kuiper Belt job. One is called The Bucket Shop Job, that was published in FNSF in January of last year. That is a story of how my character Kane joined the group. I have another story called The FTL Job, which is even earlier in time than that one. That is the story about how Ty, Strange, and Alicia, the first three members of the gang, began working together. And then I intend to write prequel stories for all of the main characters of the Kuiper Belt job. And then there are many other stories that could be written in the years before this novel. But after this novel, I have another novel in mind. I haven't written any I haven't written any draft yet, but I have this sketch. I have the vague idea of an outline for what that second novel is going to look like. And I'm really waiting to see just how well the first novel sells before I decide whether or not to go forward with writing the second one. Because writing a novel is a lot of work, and I would hate to put in that work if only a few hundred people are ever going to read it.
Yes, indeed. So, did you draw from any personal experiences when you crafting the story, the Kuiper Belt job?
Everything that any writer does is a reflection of themselves. That all of my characters are me, and all of their experiences are based on my experiences. I forget who it was. I think it might have been Tim Powers, or maybe it was George R. R. Martin, said something about approach the problem of murder by considering jaywalking. You know, that you take something that you have done, like say you shoplifted something once as a kid. So you had that experience of planning, executing, and committing a crime, and dealing with the emotional experience of committing a crime, and then dealing with the consequences, whether you got caught or not. You have the emotional experience of having dealt with the aftermath of that crime. So you take that experience from your own life and you expand it. You pump it up full of air. So what you've done in your own life is maybe you stole a bottle of perfume, but what your character is doing is committing mass murder. It's the same emotional experience made bigger. So, one of my main characters in the Kuiper Belt job is a computer hacker, and um, their experiences are definitely based on my work in high tech. I worked for much of my career in a computer security company, so I'm very aware of what system hacking actually looks like, as opposed to the way it appears in movies and TV. Um, and so actually what the character does is kind of a mixture of real life and what happens on TV, because the real life part is kind of boring and repetitive. So you have to meet the readers halfway. You have to understand the reader's expectations and have the characters behave in ways that the readers expect characters to behave, even if real people like that don't do that. But the other characters, I mean, Strange is the mastermind. He's the planner of the group, and he is basically every bit of my planner persona. He is the one who plans everything out in advance and always has a fallback and a reserve plan in mind. Um, Shweta is the negotiator. And she is in some ways the character who is most unlike myself, because she's a people person. She is all about understanding and, in her case, manipulating people. That is the thing that I'm not as good at. And so I don't get into her character as deeply. Weirdly, though, another character who is perhaps even more unlike me is Kane. He is the hitter, he is the muscle, and that is not me. But what I have done is I have lifted weights. I have done yoga. I've done PT, physical training, physical therapy. So I have done a lot with my body, and so I incorporate that body sensitivity into Kane. So even though I've never been in a fist fight, I do have the experience of moving in my body and practicing things like lifting weights, and knowing that you gotta learn to feel it differently. And so I incorporate that of myself into Kane, a character who is very much unlike me. I also did work with a friend of mine who's a martial artist on the zero G combat scenes. So the you're familiar with the advice, write what you know. And the thing is that write what you know should be interpreted to mean not write smaller, but know more. So write what you know doesn't mean that you can only write a book about somebody with your exact life, because frankly, nobody wants to read about your exact life. You have to imagine something other than that. But if you write what you, if you can only write what you know, how do you write about something that is not your life? By doing research. And there's all kinds of ways to do research. I like to travel. I love to travel. And so I choose to take voyages into countries that are unlike my countries, to have experiences that are unlike my everyday life. I have I spent 2 weeks at a simulated Mars base in the Utah desert. I have taken a zero-G flight. I have gone on so many science museums and done science-related tourism. I went to Cape Canaveral, or Cape Kennedy as it was known. I've been to so many places and done so many things, and these are all things that I do because I like them, but it also provides grist for the mill. It also provides fodder for my fiction. And so I do write what I know. I do base my fiction on my own experiences, but I try to have the experiences that will lead to more interesting fiction.
What do you hope readers will take away from the Kuiper job after they finish reading it?
I hope that they will. I hope that they will fall in love with the characters. That is the thing. That is the reason that I decided to take this silly little Firefly fanfic idea and put in the 2 years of work that it takes me to write a novel, because people love Firefly. People love Ocean's 11. People love The Expanse and Leverage. And the thing that people really love about these other works is the characters. They fall in love with the characters, and the fact that these are all diverse groups of characters. They're 5-man bands, they're gangs, they're found family, whatever you want to call it. The characters and their interactions with each other mean that people can have favorite characters, and people can ship the characters. They can say, "Oh, I wish that these two characters would fall in love." And I would love if people really engaged with the characters in this book and fell in love with them in the way that they love the characters from Firefly or The Expanse.
How important was research in creating the world of context of the Kuiper job?
I have a pretty deep background in science, technology, and particularly in space science. I've been studying space and the planets since I was a kid. Certainly, I took quite a few courses in planetology and physics when I was in college. So I have a pretty deep, baked-in understanding of the planets and orbital mechanics and things like thermodynamics, and what is zero gravity like, and how do human bodies interact with vacuum. So a lot of these things are things that I didn't need to research for this book because I already knew them. I like to say that I wrote two short stories earlier in my career. One took place on a planet orbiting a gas giant inside the outer atmosphere of a supergiant star. And that one I could write without doing any research. And then I wrote another story. It was a ghost story that took place in a Pennsylvania mining town in 1920. And I had research stuff spread out all on the floor around my writing chair because I had to find, so what is an Italian family in 1920 in coal mining in coal mining territory? What is it like? How do the characters interact with each other? What do they wear? How much do things cost? So when it comes to space, I know that stuff. When it comes to people, I have to do the research. This book takes place in space, so a lot of the things that other writers would have had to take an enormous amount of time to research, I just knew. The thing that I did have to research for this book was about the very specific places where it takes place. And I had this experience that I've had many times in my writing career of making a very arbitrary decision. I said, okay, this character lives on the moon Amalthea, moon of Saturn. That's all I knew. I knew Amalthea, I knew the name, moon of Saturn. That's all I knew. Okay. And as I began researching, and I go, this is a fabulous little moon. Amalthea is Saturn's smallest satellite. It's the closest in. It actually is like inside the ring system. It's inside Saturn's radiation belts. It's a lumpy little asymmetrical rock of a moon. And so then, okay, so why would anybody live there? Well, I'm going to say, I just made it up. I said, I'm going to say that this moon was rich in molybdenum. Okay. And so that means that it's a mining moon. And given when this story takes place in terms of humankind's settlement of the solar system, I said that Amalthea is a moon that's pretty much mined out. So this moon is like, to harken back to something earlier in the conversation, is like it's like San Francisco in the 1880s. It is a town that supports. It was a mining facility, but the metal's mostly gone. So now this place is a hub of commerce supporting the miners. And so one of the major industries of Amalthea today is tourism. There's this huge casino in the middle of the moon in the hollowed out space that used to be one of the mines. There's a whole group of casinos actually. And so these aspects of the story were based on my experiences in Las Vegas. It really is like Las Vegas in a whole bunch of ways. And so
Interesting.
yeah. So I talk about like how the casino is designed to draw you in and make it difficult to come out, and the way that the customer's experience is manipulated by the casino in order to keep them present and gambling and losing as much money as possible, but not so much money that they stop gambling.
Is there a specific or chapter in the Kuiper job that holds special meaning to you?
There are two scenes that are really the ones that I keep coming back to when I think about it. One is the zero G fight in the casino, in chapter 4, I think it is, where the Kane, the grifter, sorry, Kane is the hitter, and he was supposed to sneak in the back way, get some information, and sneak back out, but his way was blocked, so he has to go through the casino, and that means fighting his way out. So it's a big zero G combat scene, and I worked with, as I said, I have a friend who is a martial artist, and I worked with her on developing this zero G combat scene. It's something that in real life would only take like 2-3 minutes, but it takes up a lot more space on the page because a fight is intense. That's why we write about fight scenes. So I put a lot of effort into that. I'm really happy with the way it came out, and that is one of the scenes that I read when I read the book in public. The other scene, which is not a scene that I read because it's too deep in the book and it gives away too much of the plot, and also it gives away too much of the plot and also requires the reader to know too much about what's happened up until this point. So I can't read this scene, but this is a scene that as I was writing the book, I was rubbing my hands together going, I can't wait until I get to this scene. In the TV show Leverage, there's a thing that happens in just about every episode where the mastermind says, hey gang, let's steal you know and it's something completely ludicrous. Hey gang, let's steal a military academy. Hey gang, let's steal a battleship. Because of course, by steal, what he means is let's pretend to be or take over the use of briefly. So let's steal a military academy. What that means is that they're going to make the mark feel that they're joining a military academy when actually the whole thing is just a scam. Um, or sometimes they literally do, hey, let's steal the Mona Lisa. And they literally do steal the Mona Lisa, but in a surprising or unexpected way, because that's the kind of show it is. So the thing that I was really rubbing my hands and looking forward to was, hey gang, let's steal a spaceship. So I hope it's not too much of a spoiler to say that in about the 3/4 point of the book, the gang gets together and steals the fastest ship in the solar system.
Yes.
And setting up the heist. It's a very complicated heist. It takes an entire chapter. Setting it up, figuring out how they would pull it off and how they get away with it was a lot of brain work to make it happen. And that is a chapter where I was noodling and noodling. I was outlining and researching and thinking for literally months to try to make the heist come off in a way that was interesting, plausible, and yet unexpected.
Hey gang, let's buy all the books of Mr. David Levine. But before we go, Mr. David, I invite you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, our fourth season, with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the five-star restaurants in downtown Toronto. So please do listen to our upcoming episode. We're gonna talk about our Food 101 Volume 12, Italian Cuisine, and Food 101 Volume 1, Basics until 13 is only the books that you need. How to create a delicious food. Available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide. So, Mr. David, how do you think the Kuiper job stands out in its genre or category?
Um, I would like to think that it stands out in being a it stands out by combining two things. I love The Expanse, and I love Ocean's 11. I love Firefly, and I love Leverage. So I believe that it succeeds in being an outer space adventure with it's more like The Expanse than it is like Firefly, in that the technology in it is all plausible, and the space science and the orbital mechanics and the way that people deal with vacuum and zero gravity is all very plausible. One thing that I love about The Expanse is the way they deal with zero gravity, because the producers have gone to extraordinary lengths to depict the characters in zero gravity and the way that gravity only exists if you make it. Whereas Firefly uses the science fictional convention of artificial gravity, such that the characters are just kind of walking around wherever, because it's ever so much easier to film a TV show that way. I
Yeah.
love zero gravity. I think about it a lot. The Arabella books also incorporate zero gravity, even though it's set in the 1800s. You'll have to read the book to find out how that works. So I want this. I want this book to appeal to people that love The Expanse and its fairly hard science view of what life in space will be like. And I also want people who appreciate the grift, the let's steal a spaceship aspect of it. And so there aren't a lot of science fiction caper novels, and that is the niche that I'm appealing to here.
So, Mr. David, what advice would you give to aspiring authors who are looking to embark on their own writing journeys?
The most important thing in the writing field, and this is true of many fields, is persistence. Having talent is not sufficient. You may have the talent to turn out an amazing paragraph or an amazing short story, but if you write this amazing short story and then you don't submit it anywhere, you don't put it in front of people, then nobody will know it exists. And it's very easy to write a beautiful short story and send it out once. Well, many people do not have the gumption to finish. Most people that think about writing don't ever put pen to paper, literally, figuratively speaking. Most people that put pen to paper don't even finish a story. Most people that finish a story don't revise it. Most people that revise it don't send it anywhere. Most people that send it don't keep sending it until it achieves publication. And most people that do all these things don't get it together to do a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a 60th time. You have to keep pushing. Your career will not go anywhere unless you keep taking action. And so you've got to keep going. You've got to keep pressing forward despite obstacles, despite failure. Um, I use the term, please don't laugh, protagonistiness. You laughed. A protagonistiness is the quality of taking action to further your goals. You want to read about people that take action to seek their goals. And I find that as a human being, people who take action to approach their goals are more interesting and more satisfied. And so I strive to be more like the protagonist of my own life. So this concept of protagonistiness, I apply to my characters and I apply it to myself. And so if you're going to be a successful protagonist of your own life, you have to do that thing that we make our fictional protagonists do, which is try, fail, cycle. Attempt, fail. Learn from the failure, try something different. Keep trying until you succeed. And then in my case, certainly many other people have this, is having succeeded, I set myself a new goal that's more ambitious and try again.
Very well said, Mr. David. And stop procrastinating, people. Go, go, go. If you have the passion of writing, go for it because probably you are the best in the making, like Mr. David Levine.
You never can
Uh,
tell.
Grand Slam awardee in the book industry. So, Mr. David, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Okay, the Kuiper Belt job is on sale now. My three previous books, Arabella of Mars and two sequels, are at this moment are not available anywhere because I got the rights back from my original publisher. But on February 13, Arabella of Mars and its sequels, Arabella and the Battle of Venus and Arabella the Traitor of Mars, will become available online from Open Road Media with fabulous new covers. And unlike the previous publication, which was only in North America, these books will be available worldwide. So if you speak English and you have access to an ebook store, I would encourage you to check out Arabella of Mars. It is an interplanetary airship adventure that takes place in an alternate Regency period where the sky is full of air and it's possible to reach Venus and Mars by sailing ship. This is basically Patrick O'Brian in space. And if you know Patrick O'Brian and his novels of the Napoleonic War, that's what it feels like. But the main character is a plucky young woman who disguises herself as a boy and joins an interplanetary freighter in order to save the family fortune. And it involves flying through space and dealing with Martians. And it is a rip-roaring adventure of a very old-fashioned style, but with a modern sensibility as far as feminism and dealing with people of diverse backgrounds.
Please do support Mr. David Levine for all the books because if you support him, more books to come. Thank you, Fitchpot, for being the number 2 best book podcast on the planet. Thank you so much. And listen notes for my latest score of 26 and belong to 10% popular show globally. Thank you, Mr. David, for your time.
Thank you so much.
Bodycon people, see you soon.